personal exemption makes her taxable income 0. So you could put in $20,000 of itemized deductions, and it's not going to make any difference to the tax return. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
There's no way, no, never mind. I asked a question. You can't carry over that.
No, not that you
I can
can't.
answer my own question.
Capital losses you can carry over, but you can't carry unused itemized deductions evaporate if you don't use them in the year in which they are incurred.
It's a deduction, not a loss.
Okay, so the other thing this tells you is if she was going to think about a non-refundable tax credit, like say she said, hey, I put a furnace in, I got the receipts from putting a new energy efficient furnace in my house. It's a non-refundable credit, tax bill's already 0. Don't waste your time doing the form because it's not going to change the bottom line. Okay. We can go through and get some of the red stuff out. If you don't know how to do direct deposit, this is a good place to learn it. So you've got the first place you enter direct deposit information is on the main information sheet. So you would go down part of the way to about here, and I started to do it but I stopped. It will ask you to enter the routing number. That is the 9-digit number that's on the extreme left at the bottom of a check. TaxWise will compare it. If you enter something that's not a right routing number, TaxWise will reject it. I guess I'd have to guess one, but TaxWise actually goes back and compares the routing number against the list of known routing numbers in the United States, and it'll turn red if you fat finger it, or if you only enter 8 digits instead of 9. Let's try that. Show you what happens. It tells you, hey, this ain't a real number. So if for whatever reason, it does give you some opportunity to catch that. And you would enter the account number here. And when you do that, when you finish, it will turn page 1040 red on the back because you have to go there and enter it a second time. Now, do not use the copy and paste feature to take the bank account information from the main information sheet and put it here. The reason they want you to enter it twice is the same reason they want you to enter the Social Security number twice when you open a new tax return. They want to give you 2 chances to enter the same number. Because if you made a mistake on the entry on the main information sheet and you cut and paste it over here, TaxWise compares the two, they're going to be identical, but they could be incorrect. So you do not want to cut and paste this even though you know how to do that. Ask you if it's a checking or savings account. My number is one different from yours because I use something different on the front page. But if you type in something here that doesn't match what's on the front page, you'll get a rejection when you run the diagnostics. It's going to compare those numbers and make sure they match. You may have somebody who comes in with a deposit slip that has a number that looks like a routing number on the bottom of the deposit slip. Typically, those are not routing numbers. Routing numbers typically only come off of a check. So don't use a deposit slip for the routing number information. You want to prove it to yourself, go home and look at your checkbook. If it has deposit slips in the back, look at the routing number on the bottom of one of your checks and look at the number that's on the deposit slip, and you'll see that 9 times out of 10 they're not the same. So you don't want to do that. Again, if somebody comes in, because one of the hardest things to do is get money back if it gets put in a wrong bank account. So if you make a mistake, no, it is.
Oh, yeah.
If you make a mistake on this and the bank account doesn't exist, then IRS just sends them a paper check. No foul. But if you happen to pick a number, an account number that happens to be real, and you make a mistake, the money's going to go into that account. And it will create an enormous hassle for this taxpayer to retrieve that money. So here again, you got an issue of what happens if the client comes in and they didn't bring a check. What do? Oh, they got it written on a piece of paper in their wallet. They want you to take it off of last year's tax return. Maybe they have that. There's a lot of things you'll be faced with. Here again is another good opportunity. If they use anything other than presenting a blank check, to go up in here, make a note. We advise the taxpayer of the dangers of, using a slip of paper in their wallet, but that's what they asked us to do. So we entered the information they gave us in the slip of paper, and at least that way, if they come back later and say you messed it up, you have a record of what you did. Or you can just refuse to do it. Some people just won't do it at all. You don't have a blank check, you're just going to get a paper check in the mail. That's just too bad.
So they could opt to come back then, right?
Pardon?
They could opt to come back.
They could. And I always defer that to the site leader, because the site leader is the guy who's going to have to sort all this out if it goes south. So I insist on seeing the check.
That's what I mean.
Right, but some of my site leaders say, well, take it off of last year's tax return. Well, you know what? Bank of America got bought by Citibank, and the routing numbers changed. Wachovia got bought by, who was it? Wells Fargo. I mean, and sometimes the numbers change, and sometimes they stay the same. Just because it was good last year doesn't mean it's good this year. So there's some risk associated with that. Okay. So what else did I want to point out on this case? Oh, so someone was asking about W-2. So I'm going to show you. You can bring it up yourself. This should look different from what you have on your W-2. Right. And the address is incorrect. So what I have will happen to me a lot is that somebody who's sitting here typing this in knows that the abbreviation for United States Express is U.S. Express. And rather than waste their time typing out United States, they think U.S. is good enough. And here's why it isn't. Because if you did it the correct way, you will notice you have a name code. The name code is the first 4 digits of the employer's name. It is one of the things IRS uses to check identity. And if you file a W-2 electronically that doesn't match, the tax return gets rejected when you go to e-file it. You may find that companies change this every year to foil to foil identity thieves. So one year they'll have U.S. Express. Next year they'll have United States Express. If this were a returning client and you accepted the carryover data, and last year the W-2 said U.S. Express is what's going to come over automatically. You may look at this year's and see United States Express. Last year's U.S. Express say it's okay. It's not okay. You got to match it. Employers may have moved. So you got to, just because this is right and this is the same from last year doesn't mean that the address didn't change. Notice here there was a mistake in the address. That's got to match. So I get a lot of stuff that comes to quality review where this stuff gets missed. And the best place to catch that is when you're doing these returns, and that's why that matters. The other thing they'll match is the zip code. So if the zip code doesn't match what's in the W-2, it also gets e-file rejected.
Didn't I type that in?
Pardon?
I thought I typed in that.
You did, but I was saying hypothetically, if this client had, this is a real case. So this lady had been a returning client for years. So if she had been with us last year and last year's W-2 said U.S. Express and this year said United States, when you open it up, that's all going to be filled in for you and it would be incorrect. So what I'm showing you here is what it might have looked like before you typed anything in. And what you've got in front of you, you would then have to go in and make these changes.
So bottom line, just if you have a returning client, even though maybe they say if you come on us for doing the return, check it.
You got to check everything. You can't. It gets really easy when you start doing these, because most of them will be the same, to just not check it. You know, oh, the thing came over, the name looks the same, I don't really think about the zip code being different, or the employer ID being different, because that may have changed over the summer. But you see the name looks good, you just stop looking and start typing in numbers. That's the danger of, and it just, your mind gets numb to this stuff. You know, sitting here doing one return, it's easy to focus. When you're doing your 10th or 12th return of the day, it's easy to kind of just zip right
I think
through.
the best way to describe all the mergers and all the changes, you can't see them.
Right, you can't. But you wouldn't believe, every year I lecture this, you wouldn't believe the number of returns that come to my quality desk where this ain't right. Right, so just people just miss it. Maybe you guys are younger, smarter, and pay more attention, but my experience has been that people miss it frequently. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure now. I was gonna say, how do you know when it's a new return versus a returning client?
When
That
you
is really
open up the
something.
social security number at the very beginning of the process,
Okay.
and you put in the social security number, if they're a returning client, it will put up a little prompt that says, yeah, exactly what it says, but something like, you know, client data exists from prior year, would you like to carry over?
Okay.
You say no, we just get a blank return. You say yes, it brings over all the stuff from the prior year. Right? Okay, so I told you this is a real case, and actually and unfortunately, it's not an unusual case. This happens a lot to me. I was working with this lady, she was a returning client, I had never worked with her before, and this is what her documents look like, rounded off of course. So pay attention here that this lady has got a $250 refund coming to her, which is essentially everything she paid in. So we're chatting, and I forget how old she is. If you look on the main information page, TaxWise has calculated her age. She's 70-something, 80 years old, I don't know. She's pretty elderly, pretty frail. And she doesn't really have a lot of income. When you start thinking about this, I mean, that isn't a lot of money to live on. So I don't know how the subject came up about working. Oh, she said, I don't know, she says, I'm thinking about not working next year. And, you know, what would that do to me? You know, I'd lose, how's that going to affect my taxes? And I said, well, you know, you get the $250 coming back, but fundamentally you're going to lose the $8,000. I said, but, you know, what's going on? Why do you feel the need to work? She says, oh, well, my granddaughter lives with me. I said, really? I looked down at the sheet, there's nothing listed down here. I said, well, you know, we asked you on the front page to list other people who live with you, and she said, well, that's my granddaughter. I assumed that, you know, I can't claim her. I thought you could only claim, you know, children. So we start talking, and I say, well, you know, that's really not the case. Just tell me a little bit about what's going on here. You know, how long did your granddaughter live with you? Oh, she's been living with me for the last 5 years. You know, she's 8 years old, her mother's a drug addict, she left town 5 years ago, I haven't seen, heard, don't know where she is, have no idea what's going on. In fact, that's the reason why I'm working the part-time job, because I need the money to help with my granddaughter. So now, what do you do? Well, in this year's return.
You make the filing status.
Right, so what you want to do is either work in the 4012, where I will show you next week a simpler way of doing it, but you need to determine whether the granddaughter is a dependent exemption for this lady. So, I don't know if it's worth it, time to do it, so.
But she would automatically get head of household first, right?
Well,
Which would help her.
okay. How would head a household help her if she has no tax liability now? Would it make any difference? It might if the income circumstance were different, but in this case, would her refund change if she filed as head of household?
No.
Would her refund change if she put the granddaughter on the tax return as a dependent?
She get an earned income credit.
That is what she missed. The earned income credit is what she missed. Now, there are cases where what you're talking about is true. There are cases where, yes, head of household would be a plus to the person, where yes, having an extra dependent on a return would be a plus to the person, and yes, maybe they would get the earned income credit as well, and that would all be a plus to the person. Could be, just in this particular case, that didn't happen because the income was so low. But the EIC is operative, and normally you don't claim EIC if you're 65 or older. You can't do it unless you have a qualifying child, but in this case, the granddaughter happens to be one. So we would run through this little chart here and ask questions around it, and when at the end of the day you find out that indeed this granddaughter would enable her to file as head of household. So if she made some additional money, if she made $16,000, for example, then maybe that would be an advantage to her. She could use the child as a dependency exemption. If she's paying daycare for the child while she works, she can claim the dependent care credit. But the big thing that's missing here is the earned income credit. So what I want you to do is in the tax return, go to the main information page. And enter as a dependent the granddaughter. And I don't have this to hand out, but it's on the screen. And again, your last 6 digits are going to be whatever your last 6 digits are. But it doesn't, in this case, it won't matter if you use what's on the screen. Back here.
The date of birth,
I don't remember.
just mixing it up.
Yeah, well, it should be 8/15/2006. Pardon?
It's not allowed to go back to my account.
If that happens, you have to log out and log back in, because there are certain problems. When you get done entering this, your entry should look like this.
Okay, go back and talk about what you did so that, because someone's got logged off with it again.
What do you need to know?
When you said, okay, when you constructed how to go back into it, what